I think we have a mini crisis in music, and that is that a lot of musicians, even some really good ones who can play some really difficult things, don't seem to know how to, on their own, figure out how fast the piece should go. Now, if that is you, if you clicked on this video because you don't know how to figure out how fast to play your pieces and you want to, I have two pieces of good news for you. First of all, you're not alone. A lot of people seem to struggle with this. And the second piece of good news is, I'm going to tell you how to do it. The first ingredient is simply knowing how fast the composer wants the piece to feel or go. This often comes in the form of a word, in classical music often in Italian, at the very beginning of your piece, something like allegro or vivace or moderato or adagio. So the first step is actually really simple. Just find that word and then find out what it means. If you see the word adagio and presto and you play those the same, well, adagio should feel slow. Presto should feel really fast. Now, if you don't have a metronome, it can be really helpful for this step. So allegro, for example, often goes to the tempo of 112 to 144 beats per minute. And the range in there can kind of depend on the style or the era or the composer, but that's sort of the general range we're working with. Now, for the purposes of more examples in the rest of this video, I'm going to lock in allegro right about 120, but just keep in mind there is a little wiggle room to work with. It could be a little slower or a little faster than that. So there you go, that's your first step. But I would actually say that most of you probably already knew that. That's kind of the obvious step, right? You look up what the composer says. It says to play fast. I'm going to play fast. But here is where lots of people, and I mean lots of people, start to get confused and lost. They know how fast they are supposed to go, but they don't know what note goes that fast. And this is the second ingredient, knowing which note value that tempo from earlier applies to. Let me give you an example really quick away from music. Let's say you're planting a garden and you have 2 packs of seeds. And one pack of seeds says plant 2 per, and the other pack of seeds says plant 12 per. Well, you know one is 2 and one is 12, but you don't know 2 per what? 2 per inch? 2 per square foot? 2 per square meter? It would make a really big difference. In fact, the one with 2 could actually be more than the one with 12. If the one with 12 was 2 per square meter and the one for 2 was like 2 per square inch, right? It matters what that number is applied to. So the same thing is true in music. If a piece says to play allegro, you say, okay, it's allegro. I'm going to guess this piece is right around 120. Well, we have to know what is 120. Are the eighth notes 120? Are the chord notes 120? Are the half notes? Are the 16th notes? Are the whole notes? Like, how do we know what that applies to? I'm going to play a quick example using a piece that most of us probably know. Now, it's marked allegro, which we're going to say is 120, but I'm going to apply that allegro to the wrong note. So I'm going to start off here by saying every eighth note is 120. In case you don't recognize it, that speed, this is Mozart. But the first time I played it, it was way too slow. And that's because I was applying the 120 to the eighth note. And now just for fun, I'm going to go the opposite direction. I'm going to apply the 120 tempo to the half note, which is already pretty ridiculously fast, but in just a second, this would happen. So neither the slow nor the fast version sounded very good. And that's because in this piece, Mozart K545, the 120 is applied to the quarter note. Now, you can just take my word on that, but that doesn't really do you any good. Then you're still kind of in the same boat you were at the beginning of the video, where you just have to kind of listen to a teacher or find someone online who tells you how fast to play a piece. So the way you know which rhythm the allegro term is applied to is by looking at the time signature. In this piece, Mozart says C, which is we often call common time, which stands for 4/4. Now, if you remember 4/4 time, the top 4 tells you there are 4 beats a measure. We're not really worried about that right now. We're really worried about the bottom number. The 4 on the bottom means that the quarter note gets 1 beat. That's actually what the 4 on the bottom means. The 4 on the bottom means the 4th note, the quarter note, 1/4 quarter, the 4th note gets a beat. And this right here is the element many people are missing. If you try to interpret some pieces on your own and maybe you find something like, okay, moderato, I'm going to try that at 100. It doesn't quite work. It might be because you're applying that moderato to the wrong rhythm value. So to go over a few common ones really quick, if 4 is on the bottom, 4 stands for the 4th note or the quarter note. If 2 is on the bottom, that is the half note. If a 2 is on the bottom, it actually makes the piece go faster than we expect because every half note is now only 1 beat. So if it's allegro and there's a 2 on the bottom, well, now every single half note only lasts for 1 click on the metronome at 120. Now there are some exceptions to the time signatures of 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8, but we will deal with those at the end of the video. Now we're going to jump into some examples to kind of explore this, but before we do, kind of get this formula in your head. There's only two elements. How fast does the composer say to play? What is the word used? And then what is that applied to? Look at the bottom number of the time signature and say, this note is that fast. That equals your speed. Here we have a Chopin Nocturne in E minor. Now, we could just say, oh, it's a nocturne. It must be slow. It must be nighttime. But let's actually dig into what Chopin said. He said to play this piece andante. Now, andante is not slow, not fast, just kind of hanging out somewhere in the middle, some motion. So it would be easy to look at the first line of this nocturne and say, okay, we're going to go kind of andante here, not too fast, not too slow, and maybe play something like this. Now, while that may sound good at first, that is deathly slow. This piece will take forever to finish. We only got through like one measure. See, the thing is, Chopin says to play in 4/4, and there are triplets in the left hand. So every three of those triplet eighth notes equals one beat. So our formula, Chopin says to play andante. What is andante? The quarter note. So every quarter note is going to be andante. And these triplet eighth notes, there's going to be three of them per quarter note, like this. I have one more normal example for you, and this is from the great composer Beethoven, Opus 53. Let's take a second here and apply what you know. So right here, you see lots of measures of eighth notes. And now if you knew nothing, you could just jump in here and just start playing. And hope you get the right tempo, but let's apply what you know. First off here, you see an Italian word. There's no numbers given because this is a little older, but you see an Italian word, allegro con brio, and that kind of means allegro fast, and then think of it like allegro plus, a little faster than allegro with some brilliance to it. But again, for the purpose of this video, we're going to keep our allegros right around 120. So then, let's say you totally ignore the second half of what I said earlier, you get out your metronome, you find 120, you turn it on, and you play the piece. Unfortunately, we got the tempo completely wrong. You see, you're right about it being 120. This is about 120. It's actually a little faster than that, but about 120. But we have to apply it to the correct note. And the correct note here is 4, the quarter note. So this is clicking at 120, but we need to apply that 120 to the quarter note. Which means the eighth notes are going to go by twice as fast as we did earlier, because the 120 isn't the eighth note, the 120 is the quarter note, so there are now 2 eighth notes for every quarter note. Now, like with all things, there are some exceptions, some nuances to kind of what I've told you, but I don't want these nuances to make you cast doubt on what you just learned. What you just learned, the core of it, I feel like so many people somehow miss out on. Either their teachers always just tell them how fast to play, so they copy it, so when they go out on their own, they just have no clue what to do, or they just always listen to people and kind of trust that that person got it right. But what you know now is the main missing element. So we are going to go into some details, some exceptions, some nuances really quick. But again, have confidence in what you know. See what the word says. Maybe look up about how fast that word should be played, and then apply it to what the time signature tells you gets one beat. The first thing is really simple. We've actually already touched on a little bit today. Whenever you see this, just the C in your music, that stands for 4/4. You see the C, it just means 4/4. Now let's take a second and deal with the time signatures of 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8. When you see 6/8, it does not mean there are 6 beats in a measure and the eighth note gets a beat. It really doesn't mean that. What it means is there are 2 beats a measure and the dotted quarter note gets 1 beat. So for the 3 tempos, 6/8 means there are 2 beats a measure and the dotted quarter note gets a beat. 9/8 is the same thing. There are 3 beats a measure, the dotted quarter note gets a beat. In 12/8, there are 4 beats a measure, the dotted quarter note gets 1 beat. And right now I'm going to show you a really good example. This is the Mozart Sonata in A major, K331. The tempo is andante grazioso, so somewhere not too fast, not too slow. But the danger is it's in 6/8. And if you apply that andante, the not too fast, not too slow, kind of in the middle, if you apply that to the 8th note, this piece ends up being pretty slow. Which you might think sounds kind of pretty right now, but it's not going to make a lot of sense as the piece goes along like this. That is because when Mozart wrote this, he wrote in 6/8, and he knew that you would be smart, and he knew that you would know the code, and you would know that 6/8 really means 2 beats a measure, and the dotted quarter note gets a beat. All right, wrap up, big picture. You open a new piece of music today. The first thing you should do is look for the word. How fast does the composer say they want it to feel? What should this piece feel like? Should it feel slow? Should it feel fast? Should it feel really fast? And then ask yourself which note value has that feeling. Okay, it feels slow. The quarter note feels slow. Doesn't mean the 8th notes and the 16th notes feel slow. The quarter note feels slow. So take the word and apply it to the lower number of the time signature. And remember, 6/8, 9/8, 12/8 are all kind of musician code for the dotted quarter note gets the beat. Go ahead and use the comment section down below if you have any questions or want further clarification on anything that I talked about today, or even feel free to throw a name of a particular piece down there that you're working on if you want kind of more specific advice for a particular piece. See you in the next video.